Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We're back with a show. Brought a guest with me. We're going to start talking about some rookies. 30 of the 32 teams have been eliminated now. We now know what our Super Bowl lineup is. Spoiler alert, you probably knew it was going to be the Chiefs and the Eagles anyway, but that is what we've ended up with in our Super Bowl. And we'll do some previews on that, but we're going to focus today purely on the rookies. And I've got an amazing guest, someone I've been meaning to bring on for absolutely ages. And it's just fate has brought a conversation about, and it meant that I could bring him on. So I want to bring on someone very special. As a 4-time Fantasy Sports Writers Association finalist. How he didn't win one of those is an absolute travesty. And I would start Stuart's inquiry if I can. He's a host of a number of shows on the BettingPros and FantasyPros network. He's also the founder of Inbetween Media. He's absolutely everywhere on social media and on podcasts. It's Seth Woolcock. Welcome to 5 Yard Rush. How are you, my friend?
Dude, Murf, absolute pleasure to be on with you. I'm a big fan of 5 Yard Rush, everything you guys are doing across the pond here. So pleasure to sit down with you. And like you said, you know, as the NFL season, we start losing some teams, everyone's teams are eliminated. We start losing hope. It's still great vibes all around because, hey, we can look forward to next year. We can look forward to the NFL draft starting this week in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl. So absolute pleasure being here, breaking down all things rookie and NFL football with you, my friend.
Oh, well, I'm first of all delighted you're here. Like, it's been too long, and I'm definitely not leaving it so long for you to come back. So we'll mention briefly last night's games.
Yeah.
The Eagles were just absolutely unstoppable. 7 touchdowns, all rushing touchdowns, 55. I don't think there's ever been a 55-point total in a championship game before, and it really was a shame because I think that was the game that people were really looking forward to see what could happen. But Eagles were just dominant, weren't they?
I mean, it's so tough right from the go. You know, you get Commanders on that long drive. They go down the field. They take up almost half of the first quarter. They get a field goal, and then first play from scrimmage for the Eagles, Saquon Barkley 60-yard touchdown run. And it felt like after that, the game just slowly started slipping away from them. And, you know, like credit to the Commanders for getting this far, but the Eagles were just really unstoppable. And I'm surprised how much they were throwing the ball, right? Like Saquon Barkley had that calf injury a little bit. It looked like he was kind of not at 100%. And we just saw a lot of A.J. Brown, saw a ton of Dallas Goedert in that game. And it really was no match for the Commanders defense, which I think, you know, credit to Frankie Louvu, who you know, the linebacker trying to jump the snap on the tush push a lot. But they got a ways to go on that Commanders defense before I think they are true Super Bowl contenders. Great run, nothing against them. But this Eagles team is legit. And we learned that once again on Sunday.
Yeah, we really did. And I think Dan Quinn will probably win Coach of the Year. And I think he probably deserves it for taking the Commanders that far. And I think it's no disrespect for them to say that, you know, it ran out for them. I don't think any Commanders fan would have said that they would have been where they were at the point of the season at any point. So for them to be in the Final Four, for them to be in the championship game, I think the fact that you've got Jaden Daniels, you've got a lot of promise and optimism. It's a young group as well. I think you're feeling pretty good if you're a Commanders fan about things, although you're probably a little sad this morning. There's a lot of optimism to be had that team can contend for a few years. And yeah, the Eagles are an interesting one because I agree they're legit, but there are some question marks about this team. And I think that if you can get a defense that stops the run, they struggle. They struggle really, really hard. And like I've said this for a few years, that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are like their absolute kryptonite. If the Buccaneers had managed to find a way through to the NFC Championship game, I'm telling you now, and I'm not saying this as a biased fan, they just got their number. They've taken them out of the, you know, if you look at their pattern since 2021, they went out of the playoffs. to the Buccaneers. 2022, they went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Chiefs. 2023, they went out of the playoffs to the Buccaneers. 2024, they're now in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. History probably tells you where we're going with that result. But I just find that they never really lay a glove on the Buccaneers whenever they play them. It's always quite a big scoreline. It was a big scoreline earlier in the season. The Buccaneers was their only loss. And I think because the Buccaneers are so good with that interior, and I think actually that's one of the big strengths of the Kansas City Chiefs is that they can stop that run. They can nullify. And I think that's why I'm a little disappointed with you can never be disappointed entirely with a matchup. But whilst I think this Eagles team is legit, they're going to lay a glove on the Chiefs, because I just don't think that passing game is quite on point to where it was 2 years ago on their last run, where they had a lot of variety. I think they were better yesterday, don't get me wrong. But I think they need to go up probably 2 or 3 more gears to really scare the Chiefs. But I think the Chiefs would have been more scared of the Commanders because of that unpredictability of Jade Daniels, and you've got Scary Terry, you've got multiple running backs, you've got a lot of clever coordinating from Cliff Kingsbury. I think there's a lot of different variety that he brings. That unpredictability is kind of what has got the Commanders into that position. So, but I think the Chiefs. I think the Eagles, as you say, they're legit. They're arguably the best team in the NFC, and I think we were all robbed of a Lions-Eagles showdown as well. I think that was probably the game I would have liked to have seen.
Agreed.
But you have to credit that coaching staff, 2 Super Bowls in 3 years.
Yep.
And this time last season, people were questioning Nick Sirianni if he was even going to be the head coach this time this year. So it's an amazing bounce back season for them.
Yeah, I mean, hats off to everyone in that Philadelphia organization. We saw them regress a bit in 2023. Kind of got the coordinators wrong, right? Like, I mean, that matters so much when you're losing both a Shane Steichen and the gentleman down there in Arizona as well. And like, it's tough to kind of come back from that if you get them wrong, but they got it right this year. They went out, they got someone like Kellen Moore, who established play caller in this league, former Boise State Broncos quarterback himself. And then you get a guy like Vic Fangio, who, wasn't that long ago, people down there in Miami were saying it's Fangio over, right? Like this guy's washed, get him out of the league. No, Vic Fangio can still coach up a freaking defense. And when you have players coming into their own here, in their second, third year in the league, the Jalen Carters of the world, before he was injured. We also saw a great run out of the linebacking core there. Zach Bond comes over from New Orleans and from a special team guy to an all-pro. I mean, great year for him. And then we're also seeing just continued development from these rookie cornerbacks, the Cooper DeJeans of the world, the Quinton Mitchells as well. So Vic Fangio's done a great job on that defense. I think they are here to stay for a while, but as you mentioned, it'll be interesting to see what the Chiefs can do. We did see their defensive line pushed around a little bit by Buffalo at times. James Cook was, when he got the ball, running loose, but then Buffalo just kept trying to run the ball with Allen right up the middle left side a little bit, and we're getting stuffed. Some bad play calls, I'm sure we can get in, or some bad calls by the refs. I'm sure we can get into that, but it'll be interesting to see what Saquon can do, because as a bettor, Murph, I was disappointed because the line I had was 125.5 yards for Saquon. They took him out at the end. Will Shipley ran wild, 4 for 77 and 1. Apparently, we were just supposed to be betting touchdowns in that game. Nothing else in touchdowns. How about it?
I know, right? It's a tricky one, especially, but then you can understand it with a Super Bowl on the line, the game's won. Of course, you can understand it. I think at any point, it's frustrating, but his line was so high, and he would have absolutely smashed it if he just stayed in a few more series. And then, as you said, we got the Chiefs. The calls. Do you know what this narrative's been spun all year about the Chiefs, about the generous calls? I think it's two things, right? Do I believe they've been fortuitous with calls? I 100% think that they have. But also, is it because that narrative is out there that people are seeing it a lot more, and all those calls that are perhaps maybe would have gone the way of other teams but people aren't looking for them? I also think that's a thing. Like, I think awareness is a real thing, that when you're out looking for things, you will find them because you're specifically looking for them. I look at the calls yesterday. I look at the Worthy catch. People going, "How, I can't believe that's been given as a catch." I can 100% see how that's given as a catch. If you watch that in live view, yes, he's guessed it, but he's an official on the field. He has to guess it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he has to call catch or no catch. Now you can sit here and argue, well, if he's not sure, he should always say no catch. That's fine. The ball doesn't hit the ground. So if the ball doesn't hit the ground, you have to kind of give catch. It's just, unfortunately, that's kind of the thought process in that half a second that official has to make that decision. Yes, you look at the replay and you say, well, I don't think he's caught it, but the key word is think. It has to be a really clear and obvious error, and I don't think it is. I think it's whatever the call on the field is whatever it is. And I think because the narrative is out there that people are just like, well, they've got away with one. Yeah, but I think with the way that the rules are in the NFL, there are officiating mistakes every week in every game, and I actually think this year the officiating standards in the NFL are an all-time low. I actually think across the league there have been more butchered and missed calls in games than any league any season I can remember. And I do think that the standard of officiating has gone down because replay is bailing them out. There is that opportunity for replay. So they're like, well, we'll let it go and then we'll go to replay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the right process because you want to be sure, but it doesn't make the officials confident because they're not having to make those decisions, right? Because they're kind of almost just allowing it to happen. And I think, are the Chiefs benefiting significantly more than other teams? I'm not sure I'm that far inclined. I do think there are games that could have gone the other way. I think of the overtime game against the Buccaneers. They got a favorable call. Yeah, they probably got an extra win or two in the season. Do I think it's actually made a difference to the outcome of the season? I actually don't. But I think it was just a case of, I looked at that game yesterday and it just had that air of inevitability of it. I looked at the Chiefs and the Bills and I was like, there is one team that absolutely knows they're going to win this game, and there's another team that hopes they win this game.
Right.
And it just felt like, I've seen this before. I know how this is going to play out, and I know it's going to be 3 points or less. And whether it's going to be in normal time, end of regulation, or if it's overtime, I just feel like there's a Butker winning field goal coming here to win this. And, it's a shame. And people will talk about Josh Allen and people will talk about the Bills, but I think not enough credit goes to the Chiefs that they just know there's that battle hardness of knowing how to win.
Yeah. And like the last thing I'll kind of say on the calls is I've consistently been one who I've profited from this run of Kansas City making deep runs in the playoffs by wagering on them consistently to make the Super Bowl, to continue to win these games when they're underdogs. Yesterday they're a favorite, but kind of a slight favorite. But the only call that really bothered me was the fourth down when Josh Allen took the tush push. We had the one ref coming in signaling it. He got kind of like taken off his path. If you watch back by a Kansas City player accidentally bumped him. That was one that I thought should have been a first down. But aside from that, like the Bills kind of got what they deserve in a way, because Xavier Worthy went for 6 receptions, 85 yards, and a touchdown. The Bills could have had Xavier Worthy, but they traded that pick to Kansas City when they knew they wanted Worthy. And like, that's the difference in this game. Like, aside from that, like who'd they have beat him? Juju Smith-Schuster, 2 for 60. You can live with that. Like, Travis Kelce had 2 receptions for 19 yards, ends his 14-game, 70-plus yard streak in the playoffs. Of course, the one game I bet him to go over that streak. So that was, disappointing day for me once again on the betting card. But the Bills kind of got what they deserved a little bit. And, I like the Ty Johnson story for the Bills, but like there were so many times where I'm just like, why is James Cook not on the field? Why does he only have 13 carries in this game? So in a way, you can be upset about the calls. You can, but the Bills or the Chiefs won that game with Xavier Worthy, who was delivered on a platter to them by Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, and Kareem Hunt, who nobody wanted to touch him, goes for 17 for 64 and a tutty yesterday.
Yeah, and I think the Xavier one's interesting, right? Because I could sit here and say, to be honest, do I think Xavier Worthy works in that Bills scheme in the way that Brady has got that organized? No, really,
yeah.
I don't think he's a good fit. But what they should have done is they had all night to make their pick. They trade down and they trade out of round 1. So they take the top pick in day 2. So you're like, right, you've got all night to think about, and you know that wide receiver is your weak position. You've got rid of Stephon Diggs, and you take Keon Coleman, who has done very little in his rookie season.
Yeah.
So that is where you missed. It wasn't even the fact that you traded Xavier Worthy and he went off in this game. He's not a scheme fit. I can understand the logic on passing on Xavier Worthy. It's you drafted a guy and you got nothing out of him. And we knew with rookies that their rookie season is going to be slow starting. That's fine. First 6, 7, 8 games. We're 19 games into the season.
Could have had Ladd McConkey, right?
Could have had Ladd McConkey. You could have had a lot of players who could have really made a difference. Or my point is, you've taken a player with that pick and he hasn't delivered in his first season. More importantly, he hasn't delivered when you needed him, which was in the championship game.
Yep.
And you had Keon Coleman, who has done very little this season, and so your top receiver is Khalil Shakir.
Sure.
And I think you've done a lot to overcome a poor wide receiver room to get to where you are. But yeah, at this point, any weaknesses is exploited. And then that was really, as you say, the difference in this game. The Chiefs, they don't have an amazing wide receiver room, but it's effective. Whereas you would say that I would still have the Chiefs wide receiver room over the Bills. I mean, that's kind of how bad it is. It's not a great wide receiver room, but I'd have almost all those guys. I'd have Hopkins, and you'd have Hopkins, and you'd have Hollywood Brown, and you would have
Juju,
Worthy and Juju. You'd have all those over Shakir and Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman. That, and that is the big differential. And I think it's just a shame that will be the pick. The Keon Coleman pick will be the one, and everyone will say, well, it's because of Xavier Worthy. I don't think it's because of Worthy. Like, fine, you didn't like him there. You trade down. I like that play because you buy some time. But you've got to make that decision right, because that's your first round pick. And that's the one that you need to get over the hill to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And there should be, Brandon Beane should get some heat. He should get some heat this offseason for that. It's because it is these small margins. People say it's harsh. That's fine, but it's these small margins that win Super Bowls. You look at teams that go on to win Super Bowls. They just make those small marginal gains, and they make those right decisions at the right time. Chiefs with Worthy, they got the piece they needed to turn up at the time they needed to propel a team that was already a championship team. The Eagles went and got Saquon Barkley, paid whatever it took.
Yeah,
we need a star running back to get us where we need to get to. Those GMs did what their teams needed to do to get them back to where they are. Brandon Beane didn't do that. He has to face some form of cross-examination. But that's enough about that. We've got 2 weeks to mull on it. I want to talk a little bit about you, Seth, because some of our listeners might not know who you are. So I want to dig a little bit into how you got your start. You mentioned Inbetween Media. How did all that kind of come about? Give us a bit of a background in you, my man.
Yeah, so I'm a small town kid from Pennsylvania out here in the States, and went to school, actually, where in that school? IUP, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, for journalism, public relations, and walked on to the campus newspaper my first day there. It was kind of my first taste at writing professionally, and always knew I had a passion for writing. Went through a lot of adversity as a youth. And the one thing that always kind of kept me straight and centered and learning from those experiences and taking them as a positive was writing. And Matthew Berry, one of my very early influences, loved his book. That was one that really kind of helped get me through some tough times. And when I was at the student newspaper and eventually promoted to editor-in-chief heading into my junior year there, we went from a print publication to an all-digital media company. So that gave me kind of my first taste of like web design, podcasting, social media, kind of putting me more into this digital realm here. And that's kind of really what kind of brought my fantasy football content out. Started writing a column, Start Sitting Seth, and also started my podcast, the Inbetween Fantasy Football podcast, while I was there as well. And that's kind of what eventually came into Inbetween Media. And really the goal at Inbetween Media is, yes, we want to help people win fantasy football championships. Yes, we want to help people on their sports betting be a profitable, smarter sports bettor But at the same time, man, we want to help people live healthier, better lives in general, make the most out of this, God-given life that we have been given, and make sure that while we play these games, fantasy sports and sports betting, that we're having fun doing it. Because what's the point of doing this all if it's not for fun? So that's really a little bit about me, a little bit about In Between Media. I've been blessed to kind of meet some amazing people along this journey, both at In Between Media and over at the Fantasy Pros family as well, that have kind of help groom me and help really make this dream a career that I am pursuing.
Yeah, you've got a new show that's just starting on Fantasy Pros, right? The first episode was out last week.
Yeah, yep. The Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show with my guy D-Bro, Derek Brown over there. We actually just broke down the Senior Bowl, a little bit about what we'll talk about today here on the program with you. That first episode with Brett Whitefield over there. So yeah, very blessed to be part of both the Fantasy Pros Fantasy Football Podcast and the Betting Pros College Football Podcast and BP NFL. So great team, very sharp gamblers over there, and very great minds when it comes to fantasy, guys who live and breathe this stuff. So blessed to work with such a talented team over in that lot. I know you do as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of great intel and people that everyone I've contributed with on articles or spoken to or known and all that, I think are all absolutely exceptional and first class at what they do. So I echo that. But then you are as well, my friend. So for those who perhaps haven't consumed loads of your content, what would you say is like your niche? I always say to people like, oh, well, people listen to me for strategy in the game, right? There's people that break down tape better than me. There's people that will eval players better than me. The people that will do statistics better than me.
Yeah.
I think there's people that will probably do strategy better than me, but I feel like the niche for me is I'll teach people how to play the game to get an edge and where to look and find the edge and to do things to create an edge. And I think setting yourself up with that to win and giving people the tools to do that whilst consuming the information they need to formulate their own plan to execute to win a league. And that's how I say sort of my niche is in a really long-winded way. What would you say your niche is? Like, I am Seth and I am known for?
I would say providing a refreshing and feel-good take on fantasy sports and sports betting. Like at the, kind of as I mentioned, like really, yes, we like to give people great advice, but at the same time, we like to have fun. We have a lot of segments on our shows that are game related over at IBT. We like to gamify it a little bit. We like to talk pop culture at the same time as fantasy sports. And you're gonna get some cuss words. You're gonna get me saying maybe some ignorant stuff on camera occasionally, but that's really me. And like I really try to be myself. Like I'm a 26-year-old who lives and dies with football, with racing, and like it's just who I am. So like really like that's us, man. Like yes, you're going to get your standard fantasy football advice. It's going to help you win your league. But at the end of the day, you're going to get some really fun entertainment at the same time. And that, like, I hope to be a spark in someone's day. I hope they can put me on in their headphones. I say something funny. I can get a little pop out of them, right? And it helps make their day. That's really us, man. We're trying to be a refreshing and feel good take on all of this.
And I completely echo that. And I urge everybody who listens to me I'm going to put the link in the show notes, but please do download it. It is good fun. Now, listen, I understand more of the pop culture references than some, having lived out there.
Yeah.
But even if you don't, Seth is one of these guys you can ask any question to, and he will tell you. So it is a really good-natured, very, very funny take on things. But it's just, do you know what I love about the content that you put out is that feel good. Sometimes you read things from people, and this is no criticism of anybody else, but it's either, I've read I read, like you, we read hundreds of articles, and you read lots of very well researched, very well written pieces, but you walk away from it not feeling fulfilled. Like it's an information dump. Like you could have put that on Wikipedia, or you could have put that in a book, and it's like, great, it's information. Did it serve its purpose? Yes. Did I feel enlightened getting that information? Probably not. Did I go on a journey getting that information?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. And I think that's what I love about you. Like, if I had to give the answer what is Seth well known for, Seth takes you on a journey with all the information he gives you. And almost all times very, very positive. Like, you do it in such a way that you bring it to life. And so it doesn't feel like you're just researching it. It's actually easier to retain information when you give it, because you give a pleasurable take on it that makes you laugh, makes you smile, that you remember it. And you don't have to reread the same piece twice. You don't have to listen to the same piece of audio twice, because you put so much care and thought and wit and value into it that it jumps off the page, or it jumps into my ears, and it just brings a smile. So yeah, I would say if you
Thank
just
you.
want something that's just really pleasant to enjoy and bring a smile to your face, then listen to Seth's podcast, because it is phenomenal, and it's just you'll be a better person just for listening to it, and you'll enjoy it too. Because I think sometimes, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone, that care so much about getting the information out, but perhaps don't always think about how the end user's consuming it. And I think you do put the end user at the forefront of everything that you do.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Murf. I greatly appreciate that. And yeah, you know, the internet is a very toxic place, especially in 2025. So it's, you know, great that we can kind of have our own little lane and live in our own little world of sports, and providing kind of a refreshing and feel good take on that is something I take a lot of pride in. And hey, man, we're here to have fun. We're here to stack some trophies, but at the same time, we're gonna talk some crap on the competition, and just have fun with it, man. Because such a beautiful sport football is, and there's so much goodness happening around it because of it.
Yeah, and I think I've seen the change for the positive, especially. I find this year I kind of felt that COVID went super positive when everyone was really stuck. People really leaned into it. The initial post-COVID, I felt, was a bit negative, and I think it was people trying to adjust to what their relationship with football is again, because I think it
Yeah.
got a bit convoluted because they've spent 2 years not watching with friends in a bar. They spent
Yeah.
2 years not watching, like it's all been online interaction, and so people really struggled with what their relationship was with football, and I think it brought about a bit of negativity, which is understandable to a degree. And society's been a bit negative with its post-COVID reaction.
Right.
I felt this year with the season, and maybe I think people are maybe disappointed with the Super Bowl
Yeah.
teams, but I feel like up until that point, there's been more positivity in the way people have received football this year and the way people have interacted with football. And I feel like we've gone almost full circle where we were 2018, 2019, where people were just sort of in love with the game again, that we had rookies that were making significant impacts, that we had lots of great plays we were talking about, and we were talking about the excitement of the game again. And I feel like there was far less of the political wasteland. There was far less of the
Yep.
negativity. I don't know. I might be
Mm-hmm.
perceiving it differently, but I
No.
kind of got to feel like this season was like really good from people in terms of how they responded from that negativity to a positive space.
No, I absolutely agree, man. Like you didn't have, you know, like I'm actually a big Aaron Rodgers fan, but like, you know, everything with him during COVID, like that really heightened people, kind of turned some people off. You know, we had the political things that happen around the game for many years as well, which is fine. I think it all has its place, right? Like I think it can't just be sports 100% of the time, but I feel like the NFL has done a really good job this year of like, hey, this is the product we have. Let's talk about what happens on the field, and kind of leave it at that. And there are so many great, you know, young players who are doing great things for their community now as well, that like I feel like it's just positive vibes all around the game. College football, I think, has been a big part of this. College
Oh,
football better than
100%.
ever now, because
Mm.
you know, you used to, if your team lost one or two games in the regular season, like, hey, see you later, better luck next year. Now we got a 12-team playoff. Now we got teams who can compete, and you can really keep that hope and that shot at potentially winning a national title alive. And I think that just translates into the NFL game as well.
I mean, we had the 8 versus the 9 seed in college football, and something I never thought I would ever see because of the college football playoffs. And if you ever want an advertisement for this, the University of Tennessee, knowing that they needed the Florida Gators to win their final game to
Yeah.
secure
Yeah.
Tennessee's spot in the playoffs, and you have there at Neyland Stadium, instead of them doing Rocky Top, you have Tennessee, who are big rivals of the Gators, doing the Gator Chomp. Everyone in the stadium doing a Gator Chomp in Neyland Stadium for their big arch rivals, because they're winning to put them in the college football playoffs.
Beautiful.
Like that alone, is why we love sport. Is things like that should never happen, and yet they do because of sport. And I just love the 12-team playoff. I think it's it's been 20 years overdue. I think
Yeah.
ever since we had the BCS selectors, and I'll never forget from this is going way back. The Ohio State Nebraska situation from like 2002,
Yep.
and you had the AP poll had it one way, the college voters had it a different way, and so you effectively had a game where you effectively had two number one teams, but they weren't in the national championship. So you
Yeah.
effectively had two people trying to claim a national title and only one national champion. You had UCF who went undefeated and didn't make the college football playoffs.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
they're claiming a national title. Well, we went undefeated. So how can we not be champions? No one beat us. And you're like, we can do away with all of this now.
Yep.
We can actually we could have put UCF in a title. And then if they win it, great. And if they don't, then they don't. And I think, the 12-team playoff, long overdue. And I agree. It just means that there's more meaningful football through the season. And that's what we all want, which is great. And so, pivoting on to more meaningful football, let's move on to 2025. So you mentioned the Senior Bowl this week. Are you actually going to Mobile or?
I am not. I will not be down in the great state of Alabama this weekend. I will have my head on a swivel, though. I'll be connected with a lot of my Fantasy Pros colleagues that are down there. Derek Brown's on the ground, I believe, as of now. He has touched down. So I'll be keeping on my head on swivel, be texting and communicating with him, making sure hopefully everyone's following everything that all the content creators are doing down there. It's great stuff. Jim Nagy puts on a hell of a performance down there. So I will not be there, but it is a lifetime goal of mine to get down there. So I'm hoping next year we're actually kind of in the middle of up to something season here at IBT, releasing a new product here in just a matter of a couple weeks. So my attention is squarely on that here from the home base here in PA.
Wow, that makes sense. So for those who perhaps are listening and they're more redraft or traditional players, or they're just getting into Dynasty, what is the Senior Bowl? Why does it matter? Why are we talking about this? What is it for those that perhaps need to understand a bit more?
Yeah, so this is the time where the NFL community, they board these little itty bitty tiny planes and they head down to Mobile, Alabama. You can only get there from select airports, so travel's a bit hectic here. But they are really there for a week's worth of studying the seniors who are declaring for the NFL draft. And while the college football playoff expansion, NIL, has been great for the college game, it has also shortened up the amount of underclassmen that are actually declaring for the draft every single year. I think we went from about 150 underclassmen last year, cut in half about to 80, 70 right now is kind of the number we're lurking at. So this is a great it's kind of the start of a draft season, if you would. This is the Shrine Bowl happened as well over this past weekend. I know some people were out there in Vegas for that, but this is where a lot of the great seniors who have been in college football for quite some time, they go. The practices matter more than the game itself. I believe the game is on Saturday. I think ESPN or ABC's airing that. Don't hold me to that, Murf. But this is the first look, right? This is the first week of great practice film that you can kind of put on display for the NFL scouts, for the fantasy football community as a whole as well. So it's just a week worth of celebrating these guys' declaration of the NFL draft, but more than anything gives us just a very close look as rookie watchers for fantasy leagues for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got with this, this is the first time, and the reason why this is important is they're not in their school schemes, in the fact that they're in a college.
Yep.
They're not in a college pro scheme. They're in a pro scheme. So they send pro coaches down to actually do this. So I think I know Mike Kafka of the Giants, who's the Giants offensive coordinator, is one. And I think there's one from the Browns. I think it's their special teams coordinator. His name totally escapes me. I think is the other coach. But the other important thing is these are people now that are going to give direct feedback as to what they're like in a professional setup, in a professional environment where they're not the outstanding player on their team. They are one of an outstanding player, of which the best come together. What are they like with their professionalism, their attitude? That's what I like about it. I think you're right. What you see in a pro scheme, what they put on tape is important. But I actually think the attitude in which they carry
Yep.
themselves, how they
Yep.
respond to coaching, how they respond to feedback, I think this is where you start to get the noise on people's elite character and those that perhaps are not so good with the feedback. And this is where you start to get that movement in the boards based on those kind of things. So that's why I also think it's important. You won't always hear. The other thing I'll say is from the stuff I've just been talking about, that you won't always hear that feedback, but that'll be stuff the coaches will hear that will set it. So you'll kind of you'll see draft fallers in boards, which is nonsense because no one's been drafted, so how can you fall? But let's just accept that people fall in the draft process. I think it starts with this week, where people are hearing things that have come out of the week from a behavior point of view, and you hear about it like a year or two after it gets reported. That so and so spoke badly to one of the coaches, and so turned up late, and so and so didn't do this. It doesn't come out right away, but the people that are making the decisions in the NFL are aware and will be aware of it. So, I think that's a big one. What are your before we get into it? What are your general thoughts on this 2025 draft class? What are your views on it as a whole? As you said, there's less underclassmen, which could mean that there's less stellar talent. What's kind of your view?
Yeah, I think from an overall draft perspective, it is a bit of a weaker class. I don't think there's a ton of depth in it. When you're looking at it from a fantasy point of view, though, like really great running back class, probably the best running back class I've ever seen. And that even still continues with two of Penn State's best running backs, Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton. They are returning for their senior year, but this is still one of the most loaded running back classes I've maybe ever seen in my life. Looking back, like I think realistically, if like a nuclear bomb went off and all the running backs in the NFL were gone today, I think everyone could get, honestly, a pretty comparable starter. Like there's about 20 guys deep this year at the running back position. So I love the running back class, tight end class, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, absolute weapons out there. A lot of day 2 and day 3 guys. A couple we'll see here down in Mobile. Gunnar Helm, one of my favorite from Texas. Really good tight end class. A lot of edge rushers. If you're playing in any IDP type leagues, a lot of edge rushers that are going to be in this class. Tackles are loaded as well. Quarterbacks, not so much though. Like quarterbacks, wide receiver too. Like I love a couple guys in this class at the wide receiver position, but like Brandon Bean, we were talking about him passing on Ladd McConkey. I think when he gets down to Mobile, I think when he gets to Indianapolis, he's going to regret that decision, because there are not a lot of guys, I think, at the receiver position like a Brian Thomas Jr., like a Ladd McConkey, that can kind of have that first year pop right at the end of the first round. So not great from a wide receiver or a quarterback perspective, but tight ends and running back, all wheels up on them maybe.
Yeah, my assumptions of that are very, very similar. One of the questions I got, I told my patrons that you were coming on, and I said, "Well, what's some things you want to know about the class?" And one of the things from James here, he asked me, was around the wide receivers. So he sees a list of wide receivers. He knows that the class isn't perhaps as good this year as we see, especially coming off last year's loaded class of wide receivers.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's really difficult to understand, and I guess we'll learn this through the process, and we don't maybe have all the answers, is the type of receivers that we have near the top of the board in this case. And I'm thinking of, people's boards would be different, but I'm thinking of like Burden, for example, like Isaiah Bond. I'm thinking of the receiver out of Miami, Restrepo, Johnson, Harris. What the style of these receivers? Do we have receivers? I guess rather than go through all the receivers, we could be here all day. To simulate, who would you say are like the top sort of X guys? Who are the top sort of deep threat guys? Who are the top potential slot guys here in this draft that people should be aware of? And are there maybe players that are only set for a very specific scheme and therefore have more risk tolerance to them versus those that might perhaps have a wider route tree and skill set and can go into any roster?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tet McMillan is probably going to be the wide receiver one for, I think, most people's boards currently as it stands. Guy coming out of Arizona, kind of your prototypical X wide receiver, can kind of move all over the field. Not the biggest guy by any means, but insane catch radius, one of the most insane I've seen on tape in a long, long time. Also a very quick, shifty route runner. So he is really going to be your 101. Luther Burden, he's somewhere between an X and a flanker. It's really hard because you watch back Luther Burden's tape, and Missouri's offensive scheme this year was really, really weird. Brady Cook in and out of the lineup all years, actually outproduced by a receiver on his own team, Theo Weiss, in receiving yards. So Luther Burden, he's going to be one of the most polarizing prospects. I've seen people have him in their dynasty rookie rankings, even in super flex formats, Murph, like all the way up at 102. And I'm closer down to like 108, 109. Like I really am. Luther Burden's going to be someone who I think a lot of people are going to have mixed opinions on. Jury's still out there just because of the regression we saw this past year. But to me, I think Emeka Ibuka, he is seen as the top slot wide receiver in this draft class. I think he can play inside and outside better than people think. I think he's one of the best run blockers coming in this draft as well. So if you are a fan of a team, you better hope they go and they need a receiver and they're somewhere late here on day one picking. You better hope they go Emeka Ibuka, because not only is this guy a damn technician with the ball in his hands, but at the same time, he can also take one deep. He can take a screen pass to the house as well. He's shifty on his route. So Emeka's another one. Trey Harris, he's a guy coming out of Ole Miss that I like a lot towards the end of the first round. I just released my first round mock draft last week on fantasypros.com. Actually have him going to the Commanders. I think he could be a really great flanker for Terry McLaurin. Can run out of the slot a little bit, 6'1", so still pretty good size guy as well. Was absolutely dynamic. Top 10 in the SEC these past 2 years in receptions, and he missed a ton of time this year too. So I think he's great. We can talk about someone we'll see at the Senior Bowl this year, actually, that I think is one of my absolute favorite prospects. Not a lot of people are talking about him yet. Small guy, small school guy. I don't want to call Stanford a small school, but maybe just not like a football relevant school. But
Yeah,
Elick Ao Manor, I think he is
I'm
going to
right
be.
there with you.
Yeah, I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I actually bet on Stanford a couple times as the dog this year, so I would tune into Stanford games, and he was like the one guy on their team that was really a standout. 3-9 as a whole for the Cardinal this year, but anyone who watched can see that this guy is a true X wide receiver. Regressed a little bit in like yards per reception this year, but still had back-to-back seasons of 62 plus receptions, 6 touchdowns there. Ashton Daniel was not a good quarterback for the Cardinal at all, but Ao Manor still really overproduced. So that's kind of a breakdown, a quick look at like the first round of wide receivers who I think are going to go in the NFL draft. Jury's kind of out like on guys like Ao Manor and Trey Harris, whether they can crack the first round, but that's kind of a first look at it, if you would, Murph.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I thought I'd just add this note on Isaiah Bond. This is a man who could run a 4.28 in the 40.
Yeah.
And we know how much people love their 40 times and their burners. And so I think people are going to see Isaiah Bond's 40 time potentially. And if he lands anywhere near that, he's going to shoot up a lot of people's boards purely on that. And rightly or wrongly, that's what will happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's so interesting too, because I feel like at the same time, like I like Bond. I was kind of disappointed what we saw from this year, kind of banged up at the end of the year, but Matthew Golden, another guy from that Texas wide receiver core. I mean, this guy is also a burner. So once again, a year after Xavier Worthy goes and sets the combine record for the 40-yard dash, to your attest there, Murph. Isaiah Bond, someone who's going to run very, very fast. Matthew Golden, a guy who came on late in the season, specifically in the college football playoffs for Texas. I actually like Golden a little bit more, but Bond still right up there too. So two great guys, I think, that kind of shape up that starting in the second round, probably the NFL draft. They one of them could both peak into the first round though. Like we saw Xavier Worthy last year go, and Bond has just as much production overall, dating back to his times at Alabama as Worthy did.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think he should be in the first round, but I do think he will. I think if he turns in a 4.27, 4.28, I think he goes in the first round because someone will go, oh, I want that speed, because that's what the history of the NFL has told us. So yeah, I think I like to point out, because I know someone will ask me, who's the quickest guy in this class? It'll be Isaiah Bond. That's what we would expect.
Yeah.
I guess before we sign off, a couple more things. Do you have any sort of I know I've got a Patreon, Danny, right, and he is always asking me about draft capital, rookie draft picks, and with this class being a bit of a mismatch in terms of some positions good, some positions not good. What is your strategy in terms of buying, selling rookie picks, and is there a sort of a threshold in this class where you would say after this pick in a 12-team league, the picks are kind of a muchness? I know it's a bit of a vague question, but just in terms of from your dynasty head, what would you be looking to do if you'd amassed some capital? Would you be looking to ship it in the next year? Would you be looking to try and move up? Would you be looking to try and get vets? I mean, what's your sort of general feel? And I appreciate that team need and all that is all conjecture, but just some general view on strategy here.
Yeah, so if you're a team who, if you need a quarterback, you can stay and you're drafting in the top half of the first round, you can stay put and go after a Cam Ward or a Shador Sanders. But to me, especially because I think Cam Ward potentially might end up in Cleveland, I got a lot of question marks about how these rookie quarterbacks are going to shape up. So, like, if you're good at rookie quarterback and you have the 102 or the 103, I wouldn't mind trading back. Trade back into the first round. Go after a guy like Travion Henderson, who I have as my RB2. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. He's also going to be a stud running back at the next level. I think these are guys you can get kind of in the back half of the first round, or at least like the 106, the 107. Let someone else pay up for Luther Burden. If someone is around that 104 is really, desperate, needy for a wide receiver, I would potentially look to moving back there as well. Like, I really like the back half of the first round. Like, obviously, you're probably going Genty at the 101 Murf if you have that pick and you need a running back. But, second half of this round, we already talked about Ibuka. That's someone that I'm circling on my my draft cards here. Also, a guy like Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, I got some questions about his straight line speed, but I still like him. We got Amari in Hampton. I know a lot of people like him. I'm a little lower than I think consensus on him, but Tyler Warren coming out of Penn State, one of my favorite players in this.
I love Tyler Warren.
I mean, I do have to say I am biased. I'm a Penn State fan, so lived in State College for a couple of years, right down the street from Beaver Stadium. So I got a lot of love for this guy. But I mean, this is Taysom Hill, right? Who can catch? Like, this is a guy who can played quarterback at one point. I mean, had over 200 rushing yards this past year, 400 rushing touchdowns as a Penn State Nittany Lion in that Andy Kotelnicki offense. So, like, if I can get that, and a guy who also was, second in the entire country in receptions and receiving yards, sign me up, man. So, like, I really like the back half of the first round. I still think that it'll be a deep second round with all the other running backs we haven't mentioned, the Ollie Gordons of the world. You get wide receivers like kind of Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson in that mix. Evan Stewart just committed back to Oregon. But so I really like the first and second round. But if I do have a pick like at the 102 to the 104, I'm open to moving back for sure. And like, if someone's willing to make me like last year, Murf, I was sitting, and I kind of have some regrets about this now, but I know I was sitting at the 103 in a dynasty league, and I had Neighbors was on the board, and I really wish I probably would have taken him, but someone offered me just a Jackson Smith-Njigba and their second round pick and their first round pick for me to move back 2 spots. And I just kept moving back in this draft. I remember at the end of the first round, I still got like Brian Thomas Jr. And I had Jackson Smith-Njigba. So it's too tough. It's tough to complain like that. So I'm always looking to wheel and deal in these drafts, specifically this year if I have the 102 to the 104.
Yeah, I think this class is kind of, I've put it in the good, not great, with some elite talent, but people will fall in love. And I think if you can find the people in your league who will fall in love with a player that's in the range that you're in, you will get paid. You'll get paid in this range, because there are some players here that will absolutely, like, if you're strong at running back and the 101, I wonder what you'll get for the 101 this year with Gene T. I reckon you could get 3-4 firsts. I think people will pay quarterback prices for Gene T. The amount of hype that he is going to come into the
Yeah.
draft with. It's going to be
Especially if he
much
goes
bigger
to
than
Dallas.
Bijan.
Especially
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, he has the potential to just go for a stratospheric price, and I think you can command a king's ransom
Mhm.
for him 100%. I look at certain players. I'm with you on Henderson. He's my RB2, and in fact, I'm actually taking him. I'm taking him above the quarterbacks now. In my first
Mm.
mock draft, I actually in a super flex, I was taking the quarterbacks first. I don't think these quarterbacks move the needle. I just don't. I think
Yeah.
you're looking at Sanders and Ward, no real rushing threat, no real rushing ability. I think you're picking QB 15 quarterbacks at elite position in the draft, and I think can I realistically, with the injuries at the position, could I just pick up someone off the waiver wire who will
Yeah.
do the same thing and punt it a year into a
Mhm.
deeper class, which 2026 is going to be, and actually go, do you know what? I might just skip the position because I think people will take Ward or Sanders. I think if Sanders goes 101, I think some people will take him in the 101 in the
Yeah.
Superflex draft, which is mind-boggling to me that would
Yeah.
happen. So I just think you could, if you unless you were really in need of a quarterback, I could fade the entire position this year,
Yeah.
or take a flyer on someone
Mhm.
like a Milrow or someone who could do something different, as opposed to just take these guys because they're going to be top 5 picks.
Well, and I think that's a great point you made about like punting the position at the top, and like I do think Cam Ward has a little bit more rushing upside than I think the general public gives him credit for. But not a
Yeah.
fast guy by any means. Kind of just a guy who does it out of necessity. Jalen Milrow, on the other hand, like he at one point when I was early in my ranking process, I actually had Jalen Milrow up at my fourth player overall in this class just because he's a quarterback. At the end of the season was not great for Milrow. He really kind of fell down my board quite a bit. But at the same time, like this guy's 6'2", he's 225, had over 20 rushing touchdowns, and was unstoppable in games against Georgia earlier this season. Also, could not be stopped against LSU, against Auburn. These are SEC level defenses that his rushing ability was real. So if you can get Jalen Milrow at the end of the first round, if you can get him in the second round, even depending kind of what your league's pulse is on him. Jackson Dart, another guy that I just talked to Brett Whitefield and Debro last week. I know they're both kind of high on Jackson Dart. Dual threat guy, so could have something a little bit there. I think at the same time, I like Kyle McCord a lot coming out of Syracuse. This guy's got
Yeah.
an absolute cannon on him. Played at Ohio State the year before, so we've seen him do it against different competition levels. Like, I absolutely agree that if you want to punt the top two guys and you want to sit and wait and grab a guy like McCord, like Dart, one of these guys kind of later in the draft, I'm cool with it. And like, hey man, like Aaron Rodgers is probably gonna be free. I mean, you can get Aaron Rodgers for probably a foot long Subway hoagie and a 6-pack of beer, maybe a pack of cigs on
Yeah.
top of it. You might got to throw a couple darts in there too to move the needle. But like, I feel like Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, we don't know where they're going to land yet, but they're all kind of guys in that mix who they can provide QB2 numbers, I think, in the right environment. And I'd rather just pay
Mm.
nothing for them than pay a first round pick for a guy like Cam Ward or like Shedeur Sanders, who a lot of question marks in both their games.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the thought process I kind of have as well. Is I just don't think you're going to get to where you want to get to, and so stockpile the talent. If you need a quarterback to win this year,
Mm-hmm.
then this isn't the year for that. So you might as well just go through another year
Yeah.
or try to acquire through trade. I always think that I look at this class, I look at what's available, and I think, do you know what? If you can get a Aaron Rodgers for, the 301, I'm sure someone will probably give you that. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think someone will snap your hand at the 301. Do I think that you're going to get a better pick? Probably not. So I sit there and think, okay, I mean, I won't be doing it, but if you want that sort of ilk of player, Bryce Young, you'll probably get for the 301. I'm
Yeah.
sitting there thinking, like, if you're at that end of the board, you're like, well, I need a quarterback in the super flex, but actually Gene T's there. I would take Gene T, and then I would just trade my 301 and I'd go and get someone who's never going to be great, but just someone who's just going to tick along. Maybe Bryce Young might be a bit harder because he started to raise slightly. But look at it. Look at a player who's just going to be QB 18, QB 19, QB 20, and think, I'll just sit there and pick a guy in that range. And
your guy Baker Mayfield, brother, right? He was a guy this past year that dynasty managers still really weren't sold on him. His keep trade cut value was low. He was going undrafted, and redrafts comes out and slings it for 40 touchdowns, right? And obviously I'm not saying go out and trade the farm for Baker Mayfield, but that type of quarterback, that is what you want, is one of these guys recency bias. Everyone's going to be off Jared Goff now because he's losing Ben Johnson and he just had a stinker in the NFC divisional round. He's a guy I think you could go out and throw a mid to late second round pick, maybe 100%. A veteran with it, and maybe get a Jared Goff. That's something I'm going to be desperately looking to do in multiple leagues. Play off this recency bias, right, Murph?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's a great point. I think that you probably couldn't put it better. I'd look at maybe even someone like Derek Carr, because he's not played much. He's on no one's radar. They're going to hire someone innovative in the head coaching position there. They're going to try and really refire in that position. The NFC South isn't a great division anyway. Anyone can get out of there. Those are the sorts of guys. Go pick someone interesting. And the point is there's enough veteran players in the Superflex League that will go that you can get. Don't take a quarterback in that 101 or 104 range. Go and take best player available, because I think for me there are 4 difference makers, I'd say elite difference makers, who could go in and be top 15 in their position in their rookie year and continue to make a difference year in, year out. At least 4, but definitely 4. And I think I'd rather have those than settle, because it's a super flex format. Well, we've got to take Cam Ward, we've got to take Sanders. If we do nothing else in this show, we'll debunk that theory that just because it's super flex, you don't have to take the quarterback. Final question for me, and I'll let you go, is in terms of sleepers. You've mentioned a few. Are there any sleepers that perhaps aren't on people's radars that people should go and look at and really sort of delve into and think, okay, and get ahead of the curve so they can look a bit smart?
Yeah, I kind of touched on Eli Manor earlier. He's kind of my favorite sleeper. I don't think he'll be a sleeper for long. I think he's a guy that will kind of pop up in people's boards pretty quickly here. LaQuint Allen out of Syracuse. Again, I kind of watched a lot of Syracuse ball. I'm not a big ACC football watcher, but Syracuse was must-see appointment television this past season. LaQuint Allen had some big games. I remember the UNLV game, put the team on his back, and he had over 60 receptions this past year while having over 175 carries as well. So true workhorse stuff down there from LaQuint Allen in Syracuse. He's a guy you can catch at the Senior Bowl this year. I think he should definitely be someone that we're watching, we're paying attention to. Kind of in that same range, no one's really talking about him. I like both the Michigan running backs, Khalil Mullen, Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards kind of has that home run hitting speed. I think he can get to the next level. Pass blocking, that's a different conversation. I think his pass blocking needs to improve. Khalil Mullen's just a really good between the tackles type of runner as well. So I really like both those Michigan running backs potentially as sleepers. Staying at the running back position, Cam Scatteraboo, anybody? Anyone see what this guy did against Texas?
Cam Scatteraboo,
yeah. Just tough runner. Reminds me a lot of kind of like a LeGarrette Blount coming into the NFL. Is just a guy who's going to break tackles, but can also catch the ball, can throw the ball, as we saw in that game as well. So those are kind of some of my favorite sleepers at both those positions. If you want a sleeper at the tight end position too, I mentioned his name earlier, Gunnar Helm out of Texas. This is a guy who continues to get better, actually led Texas in receptions this past season. So really good guy. They didn't get much involved as much as I would have liked to see in the postseason, but big dude, like gigantic dudes, got the size to be, kind of like a Jake Ferguson type. I don't think he'll ever break the mold or anything, but someone who I think can come in and potentially give you tight end 1 production early in his career, just because he has been a pass blocker and a run blocker on one of the best offensive lines in the country in Texas. So Gunnar Helm, another person I'm kind of looking, maybe take a shot in the 3rd round if you don't want to trade out for Aaron Rodgers or something like that.
I absolutely love it. Man, this has been a joy. I'm going to have to get you back on before the season starts. We can break down the draft and see how all the
Yeah.
chips fall, because I think that would be more than valuable. But before you go, tell everyone where they can find you, where they can find everything that you're doing, all the work, absolutely everything that you're doing.
Yeah. First of all, guys, make sure you guys are showing Murph love. I've been a big fan of 5 Yard Rush, man, and like the entire vibe of this, organization has been whole. I've talked to so many people who've written and produced content for 5 Yard Rush. So make sure you guys are doing everything you can to support Murph and the Rush family over here. For myself, you can find me on Twitter at between_SethFF. You can also find In Between Media there at IBT_media. We're also on YouTube at IBT_media. We got a lot of rookie content coming for you. If you guys are also into other sports like college football, like PGA, like NASCAR, we got entertainment betting. We got all that over there on the channel on YouTube, inbetweenmedia.com. And then please just support us over at Fantasy Pros as well. We're at Fantasy Pros and at Betting Pros on YouTube, fantasypros.com, bettingpros.com. Actually, right now, working on some season win total betting articles over there for BP today. So I'll have that out there on the site for you, hopefully later this week as well. We can start cashing some early tickets for 2025 here, Murph.
Absolutely. Everyone who wants to go and see a game in the US and think I can't afford it, I'm not advocating betting money because I'm not a big gambler myself. But if you're thinking, if I just started a little pot and see if I could turn that into a ticket to the US, follow Seth's advice, you might end up doing that and saving yourself a pretty penny when you do. So give Seth a follow. I'm going to put a link to his YouTube, his podcast, and also his handle. Do give him a follow. If nothing else, he's just one of the great guys out there. You won't regret having him on your timeline. So, buddy, thanks so much for coming on.
Murph.
I greatly appreciate it. Stocks and I will hopefully be back at some point this week. He was battling some illness last week. Bless him. We just can't seem to be. I'm ill, then he's ill, then I'm ill. We've been playing ill tennis.
That time of year, baby.
Stocks and I. So it's been really rough, but we are hopefully out of the other side. So we'll drop some knowledge later on this week. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.